Today's sermon is titled Reality with a Twist and Other Existential Anomalies, to be delivered by Jeff Walters. Now, Jeff Walters has a lifelong interest in science and metaphysics and where they collide. His grandfather was an aerospace engineer who designed the heat shields for the early Venus probes. He is a fourth-generation astrologer, having learned it mostly at his mother's knee. In college, he majored in anthropology as a way to explore mysticism and the human experience. I give you Jeff Walters.
Good morning, folks. Thank you much for having me. And I have some news for you about the reaches of reality and where they might be going. Oh, yes. Sorry about that. I've been told that I can be liberated from this, at least for the moment, and probably sound better when I do. So there we are. So the unusual image you see there sitting in front of you is the M.C. Escher's etching of a Mobius strip. And the way that he understands, or way he is illustrating the way the ants are moving across it, tells you that they can move in and out of the strip without crossing over any boundaries, is what they call that. Hence the reason why I brought this long. Thought you might enjoy it. So at any rate, sometimes people consider a lot of the things that I do have debatable consequences. At any rate, there we go. For those of you who also follow in that ilk, I'm hoping I will make you more comfortable. For the rest of you, I'm probably going to make you uncomfortable. However, I think I shall intrigue all of you. So the entire point of this thing is that reality does form a twist. And there are interesting twists in reality if you pay attention, which I'm going to illustrate now by building a Mobius strip right before your very eyes. At any rate, here we go. First thing is sometimes you have to cut through some red tape. So, at any rate, here we go. I'm trying to do this as rapidly as possible, but there are some things that do need to be constructed from this. At any rate, as you'll notice, we're not going to cross this line, despite the statement that is kind of redundant in saying that we shouldn't cross it. We intend not to. So I am going to tape it closed, despite the admonition you shouldn't tape anything together on this sort of thing, but this is the only way to get it started. However, it's a little easier when you're drawing it in that regard, because you're drawing it in the environment from which it came from. You see, the thing about the Mobius strip is it's a basically two-dimensional object in a three-dimensional space, out here where we live. But the funny thing is when you change dimensions, you also will often change perception, which is really what this entire talk is all about. So what I want you to understand is that what you think you see is not always what's there. So what I hope to do is intrigue you with the idea that what is here isn't always what you think you see there. So this is where the twist in reality comes from. Notice it's a nice flat piece of, in this case, tape. And we're going to go ahead and give it a twist, like so. That's not a twist. This is a twist. And we only need to give it a half a twist. So it's not that really complicated, but we're going to go through this way. And as you can see, it's a little bit difficult sometimes, and they don't always want to go the way that they're supposed to. But we will try to glue it together as best as possible and get this thing started. So here we go. Now, there's our little twist in the middle of it, if you can see that. And now, the knife. In this case, two of them. We call them scissors. So, at any rate, we're going to start over here where the tape is, and in some regards, we're going to cut it away. And I want to ask you something. Well, actually, first, let me show you where we're going. I'll take this little device here. It's a little pen. We're going to drag some dirt across this, otherwise known as ink. And you will find that, in fact, this side is, in fact, also the other side. So, because it only has one side. If you've ever tried, it's kind of interesting because it doesn't quite do the thing that you think it's supposed to. Because as we move along this tape, and for those of you who went through the 70s and enjoyed listening to music, you might have heard of something called an 8-track tape. And this is why this worked. Because an 8-track tape is actually fueled by a Mobius strip. And it's actually twice as long as you think it might be. So when you put it in, you don't have to flip it over because it flips itself over, which is kind of the point. If you'll notice, this is still going along. And we get to this side, which isn't a side really. If you'll notice, you can kind of see the other side of the tape because you can see through it. It's translucent. So if I go like this, I won't get any ink on my finger, but if I do this, the ink does come off. So I'm on the other side, technically, but it doesn't exist, of this paper where the ink got started, because it's on the other side of this, but there really isn't any other side because there's only one side. So that's what we're trying to do. So the whole point is that reality is sometimes not exactly what you think it might be. So this is kind of the fun, and this is why we're demonstrating it. And my point about the whole thing is, and one of the reasons why I think it was really interesting, the film called The Matrix, is they called things that didn't quite fit in their computer simulated analogy, they called them glitches. I would call this, in our real world, a glitch. So as you can just see, I just connected the two lines. They now do connect on one side, and they're all kind of wet. So they get kind of that, and now it really does look like a crime scene, I'm sure. At any rate, so, sorry, that's the way I think. At any rate, apologies. But I'm going to prove to you that this has one side because it's not going to act like a two-sided object. I'm going to actually cut this. Obviously, you can see that I'm about to do so. I'm cutting this object, and you would think that you can cut something into two pieces, right? And anytime you cut something, of course, it becomes smaller, right? Well, not this time. We're going to do something completely different. Or it's for those of you who are into Monty Python, now for something completely different. We're going to cut an object into something you wouldn't expect. So as we move through it, we're cutting it down. You see, we're at least cutting it away from itself, but I'm not really going to actually, well, maybe I shouldn't tell you yet because I want you to think about it. So really, the whole point of this is that what we want you to do, and hopefully come away from this conversation with, is a different sense of what you think you really see and what you suppose is supposed to happen. In other words, really what I want you to do is change your mind. So I'm at the very end of it, and usually when you have a loop and you cut it, what usually happens? Anybody? What was that? You end up with two pieces. I think that's a logical and reasonable thought. Yes, but since I'm going to do that right now, is that two pieces? There are not two pieces there. There's only one piece. And since I cut it down, I also cut it longer. How many times do you get to do that? So, yes, I have actually stretched this entire object. This hole has been stretched with a knife. So, try that in your everyday existence. But it's right there. I just did it in front of you. It really is. That's not a trick. That's a glitch in reality. So, there is a Mobius strip. And the other interesting thing about it is when I cut it, it actually now has 2 twists in it. Okay, isn't that fun? What do you think would happen if I cut it again? Why not? Hey, it just gets weirder and weirder. It's kind of like, watching Alice. It gets curious and curiouser. So let's see what she does when we cut it again. Okay, so I'm going to cut it right there. And this is a little trickier because of the fact that it gets smaller as far as the width goes. But do you think we're going to get a longer one? Or maybe something else? Just because it's such a weird object, it's not really supposed to exist in the 3 dimensions, or at least not that we think it should. Like I said, it's a bit of a glitch. So as we cut it, it starts to do other things. And we're cutting the twist, and since we twisted it twice, you think that it's back right again, and that it's a real circle again, and maybe we can cut it in half again. What do you think, anybody? Or is something else going to happen? Something maybe even stranger. So, as I'm trying to cut this without cutting it across, because we don't want to cross the police line here. So we have to police the fact that we're cutting it straight. So I'm getting it straight cut right through here and through the red tape. Because after all, we do want to cut through the red tape and find out what's really there, right? So we'll cut through the red tape right here. Yes, that's it. Going to cut it away. Because after all, wouldn't it be nice if we could do this with Congress? Cut through the red tape. It would be so much better. Anyway, if it could be so easy. Of course, as you can tell, this is a little bit hard if you think about it, because it's not the way most people think. You really do have to think of outside the box, or in this case, outside the loop. So don't get all looped up into one spot. Keep your mind open, which is really the whole point that I'm trying to make here. This is all about how to keep your mind open and keep your mind open for new ideas and new ways of looking at what you thought you saw and coming to a new conclusion, even though you seem like you're in the same place. As they say, you go far and return to the place where you've been and know the place for the first time. Or in this case, you don't know it at all, maybe. And now you have a new place entirely to get to. So that's really the idea. So we're getting there, we're almost to it. Okay, so here we are. It's about to happen. Here's that little thing right there. Okay, the moment happens. What's going to happen now? Is it going to get longer? It's going to get bigger, or something entirely else? Well, maybe something else. It now has formed 2 loops that now go inside and outside of each other. And yes, I've spent a lot of time doing this, and you can actually make garlands for Christmas if you like, the little loopy things. And this is what I did actually over last Christmas, just for fun, because I was just having fun. They just keep making bigger and bigger garlands all the time, and they are all connected, which is the point of reality. Everything is connected. We're all blended together. You can't really cut us apart. People think that you can, but it's not true. I've just proven it right there. So we're all connected, you see, and everything is unfolding as it should, you see. So there you are. So there it is, all in real life, and I've just demonstrated it in a physical property, which I think is kind of fun. And if you don't believe that's true, I have something else for you to take a look at. So this right here, you see the ring can't come off, can it? It doesn't look like it, does it? You think it can't come off, but maybe it can. But you have to think maybe in a little bit of a twisted sort of way, and it will. And I just did it in front of you because this is also a Mobius, you see. And all you have to do is give it a twist, and it's right back where it's supposed to be, don't you think? Isn't that fun? So yes, we're all connected. And really, the whole thing about this is this also has one side, because its inside is its outside. That's why it goes on and off. As opposed to, you see this is solid, can't go in, can't come out, except for when you fold it. So that's the fold right there. And you see, that's that's a folded and forked U. So, pardon me for the forked U, but there you go. So for those of you who don't believe it, fork U, try it sometime. At any rate, there you go. So this whole thing, you see, this is the inside, right? Actually, it's not, because this inside also goes to the outside. So this only has one side when I've folded it. That's why it can go there. And it ends up where? On the outside. Because it never really did go inside because it has only one side. But it all depends on how you fold it together. You see? So this is the idea. This is, again, a glitch. Go watch The Matrix sometime. It's an interesting film, and this explains what this is. So if you can understand how to get through it, okay, you can realize there are holes in reality. This is one of them. Okay, so, and the whole point is how it folds over. All that kind of thing. Where's me music? Anyway, we'll see how that all goes. So actually it was playing a tune earlier, and that was Within You, Without You by the Beatles, which also explains how this thing works. Because the inside is the outside, and that's within you and without you. All things happen all the time, all around us, and they're all connected. And the idea that we're not is actually the illusion we create for ourselves. So this is how the reality really works. So I'm gonna give you another slide there. That's a physical one. I think that's in Amsterdam. One of another representation made of metal and so forth, and it's rather pretty, of the artwork in, well, like I said, in Amsterdam and all that, about M.C. Escher's wonderful one-sided object that looks like it actually has two sides, but no, it doesn't. It truly only has one, because we're all one, which was the point that I was trying to make. At any rate, he also did some fun things with a man named Roger Penrose, who was a mathematician. This is called a impossible object, because if you look at it carefully, it shouldn't connect the way that it's connecting. But it is a perception. It doesn't really do what you think it's doing, but it is doing what you think it is up here, but it's really only something that doesn't really exist. But it can exist mathematically. So that is called an impossible triangle. Again, developed by Roger Penrose in his conversations with M.C. Escher. And M.C. Escher then started creating other images from it. If you try to fathom that one, which is a little weird, in fact, quite weird. So I like spending time here, shall we say, because I think a little differently than most people anyway. I'm just odd. But it intrigues me. I love the riddles of reality, and reality doesn't always really appear what you think it might appear to be when it does what it does. So, and that's another impossible triangle. So that one's fun. Beyond that, I'm sure a lot of people have seen that symbol here before. They've also probably seen it over here, whoops, right next to us. The yin and yang symbol, which represents inside and outside. But the point is you see the two little dots between those points. are called, each one is called a monad. The monad is actually what connects both the black and the white, or the dark and the light, or the in or the out. And in those connections, you find that's the unfoldment of that reality, and it is actually only one thing. So yin and yang all support each other, and you can't have one without the other, because otherwise, if you look carefully and try to separate them, what do you end up with? Anyone? Tears. Right. So you can see that the yin and yang of the world and the opposites always need to attract, because they really do make one. So in our own species, we represent that as male and female. And of course, males without females are often very, very sad. Definitely the males. I think the females can kind of do without us, but that's our problem. At any rate, so, you know, talk about biology and corpus callosums, and they usually have the bigger ones. We have the smaller ones. Just with a gentleman, be humble. Remember, that's a good concept. At any rate, so that is yin and yang. So the inside and the outside, and really only having one side, because that is the whole holistic nature of looking at ourselves and how we actually are. We only perceive that the world is in and out or dualistic. We really actually are whole. So that's the whole point of this. So, and the wonderful thing about good old Morpheus, which we talked about earlier, you take the blue pill and the story ends. You wake up in your bed and you believe whatever you want to believe, which is often what we do most of the time, especially just after we've awakened, or we think we've awakened, when we might actually still be in the dream. You take the red pill and you stay in Wonderland. And I'll show you how deep the rabbit hole goes, which I've just started to take you on, and I hope you're enjoying the trip. So anyway, oh, you're very welcome. Thank you. I'm glad to hopefully give you an interesting idea about it. Now, here's the thing. I started out with a piece of tape in this little room, and then well, it's a nice room anyway. And then I showed you that the little horseshoes right here, they're not handcuffs, they're horseshoes. But at any rate, another story. You'll find that we've just now moved on to the galaxy and the universe here and all of that. And this is that image is actually called the smiley face, universe. And actually, and you can see the two eyes right there. Those are actually what look like two galaxies. The interesting thing about them is they're actually only one galaxy. They are split in half by a huge weight in front of it. They consider this one of the ways to define dark matter, because you can't really see the matter that's in front of it, causing what is called gravitational lensing in this picture. But really what's happening is that right there on a galactic scale is in fact a Mobius strip. Yes, it is taking the light itself in our universe, gathering it up, splitting it in half, and then pulling it together and sitting it side by side. So it's a Mobius strip you're looking at right there on a galactic scale. It is one thing that looks like two things because we perceive it that way, but not because it actually is. It's still only one thing. Like I said, we're all one. So we just perceive that we are two things. So if you really understand who we are and what we are and how the universe actually works, there is a oneness and a wholeness to the universe. It is only when we try to take things apart and smash the continuum that we try to make these things into two things. They're not really two things, they're only one thing. So, moving on, there's kind of the end of it right there. So that's the interesting thing. Here's another thing that most people know about. I think this might be a little bit stylistic, but it still gives you the idea. That's a black hole, the most terrifying thing in the universe, because anything that goes in won't come out. Well, so the interesting thing about that, unless you talk about Hawking radiation, but that's another story. I'll talk about that later. But at any rate, if you did go to the edge, if you were unfortunate enough to get to the edge of a black hole, you would find that first thing that happens usually, and you often talk about, is a thing called spaghettification. where in which you stretch yourself out because of the gravity. Your feet fall faster than your head does if you're going feet first. If you're going head first, I imagine your head would feel really weird. At any rate, I suggest going feet first if you're unfortunate enough to do it. So, but if you did go feet first, your feet would stretch way out ahead of you and your head would kind of follow along. So that's called, and you become this long thread. It's called spaghettification. They also now believe that it's a possibility, and you would do that across the event horizon. That's that interesting little, it's the edge of the hole, basically. So that's called the event horizon, and things happen on the event horizon which are very strange. Again, we have a hole. So holes are usually things where strange things happen, especially if you go down into them. At any rate, as the edge of the hole is worked with, you're going to find that you were kind of smashed out across the edge of that hole. That's part of the spaghettification thing. And also you'll light on fire. Isn't that fun? Because of the pressure and all of that, and the friction, actually, of course, caused by the immense gravitational pull. So much pressure and so much pulling will actually, they now think, pull you into two parts. Not because you've fallen apart, because you actually have become two entities. One is going to get smashed across the outside of the ring. The other one is actually going to plummet right through the middle of the ring, and nothing will really even happen to that part of yourself. But that's a whole part of yourself. You're literally split into twins, but they're still the same person. So the one person will experience the destruction of themselves, or at least the people that watch that person going in will see you getting smashed up and, you know, reassembled across the universe, across the event horizon. However, the other part of you, the part of you that it gets to experience, I think hopefully just is the only one that gets to experience, but that part of you gets to experience nothing, basically. Just that you plummet endlessly into a hole that has no bottom. So forever, which is still kind of sad. So at this point, we'd be playing Major Tom, and he'd be kind of lonely, and, you know, the old lonely spaceman. So maybe hopefully listen to some of these songs and think about what we just saw. At any rate, as you head through that, you find that, like I said, you are split into two parts, but you're still actually whole. You're only one person. They also talk about that in physics, where in fact, you can see an object in two places, but it's still the same object. So that's, I think it's called pluriposition. At any rate, I might get corrected on that, but at any rate, again, the whole point is that itself, again, is a Mobius. You start from one point, and it appears that you become two, but really you're still connected and you're all one. So one of the things I like to use the Mobius strip for is questions about metaphysics. What do you mean by that, Jeff? Well, I'll tell you. I'm talking to myself. Why? Because I'm split. Anyway, that's another thing. At any rate, the point being is that metaphysically, we are all one, even though we have different times in our life. We look at the world in time, in a timeline, and a lot of physics and the idea of time itself is something that is very human in many respects. We see time linearly. The universe doesn't. Apparently, time exists, all time exists in one time. So the beginning of the universe and the end of the universe and everything in between all happens now. But that would be kind of boggling and a little bit strange and kind of too many things in the closet, I think. So we try to see things as linear and laid out. But actually, that's not really the way it works. But again, for the idea of wholeness, it's kind of interesting to note that we are everything, everywhere, at all times. And that's kind of the idea that you're part of God as well. So with that, I'd like to leave you with the idea that all things are possible, even things you never knew about. So thank you so much for listening.